I was telling Tony that it always feels like coming home when we come back here. Um, when we retired from Pepperdine, both of us, and we had the opportunity to come here, we had no idea what to expect. But when we got here, we found family, literally physical family that we didn't know we had here. We had spiritual brothers and sisters, which we expected to find here. And the family here took us in, made us welcome, made us part of the family. And we enjoyed that for a delightful 2 years. And it was this second time that I had retired. And I thought, well, this one will be the last time. But lo and behold, that was not the way it was to be. And I'm sure some people wondered why, after only 2 years, we left. Well, some of you may know, and others may not know, I began to have physical problems. And first thing, it was one knee replaced, and it was next knee replaced because I couldn't stand and preach anymore or teach. One after the other, one after the other. And some of you have expressed concern about my most recent surgery, which is a spine surgery, the second one that I've had in 5 years. Uh, when the doctor was taking the staples out of my back, and they went in the back and the side, both this last time, and that was my second one, as I said. And I said, you know, doctor, this is the sixth major surgery that I've had since I retired. And that doesn't count cataracts and things like that. And he said, well, maybe you shouldn't have retired. Somehow or other, the cause and effect didn't seem to ring true to me. But anyway, it was good to be back here and see the a lot of the same people, some new people that we've met today. And someone once said the only change, the only constant in life is change because we're constantly changing. Um, and in some ways, it's good to see. Some ways, it's not. And we always hate to see people die, see people leave, move away, or whatever. That's the kind of change that we really don't like. Sometimes change is exciting, and we look forward to it, and we create it ourselves. Over our lives, Sandy's and mine, we've lived in many places around the world and all over the United States. A lot of different kinds of work, mostly pretty much related to education. And when I had the opportunity to come here, I had retired from Pepperdine University after teaching there and serving as an elder in the church in Los Angeles. And of course, 2 years here preaching and teaching, and then on to the little town of Lakeport and attending the little church in Kelseyville, and it's still little. Preaching off and on, teaching off and on. At one point, we had 5 elders. We had 4 retired preachers. And so there wasn't much opportunity for me to get up here and tell you all what's to. Anyway, but it's different, and I enjoy it. And I enjoy the time. And the recovery from each of those major surgeries has been long and difficult. And my most recent one, almost 4 months ago, for spinal stenosis, the recovery has been marvelous. I feel great, and I can stand up again, and that's great. As I was thinking about coming down today, and I appreciate the fact that we were able to invite ourselves. We had to come to Santa Rosa for on another matter, and Sandy said, well, why don't we visit with Tony and Gloria while we're down there? So I wrote him an email, and he got back to me. I said, we can preach if you want to while we come down. We just want to visit. So next thing I know, all the arrangements had been made. What I didn't know and didn't realize is I was invading Vince's home at the time, but that worked out okay with us anyway. And I hope we were too much of an intrusion on Vince. But anyway, it was a good excuse for us to come back and visit here and learn what's going on, all the happenings, and share with Tony and Gloria and some of you what has happened in our life. I'm finding that as I grow older, and I am, do you believe I'm already turned 78? I didn't think I'd ever live that long. Well, they keep patching me up, so I guess I'm liable to live for a while. But I look back on my life and have written some things about what I feel that's happened in my life and how the Lord has blessed us both in all these years. And uh, and so I think back at some of the things that have happened. And I was teaching I was teaching 10th grade English in a suburban high school near Seattle many years ago now. Um, and I was teaching English, and in one class I had a very shy boy who sat in the back of the room, never said a word, and he always just kind of had a downcast look to him all the time, and I'll call him Dave for lack of a better name at this point. And life hadn't been kind to Dave, to say the least. Um, Here he was in 10th grade, and so shy that you could hardly talk to him, and people ignored him. All the other students, if they weren't heckling him or something, they were ignoring him. And the teachers, when I talked to them about Dave, they said they weren't very kind in their comments about him either, and about his family situation. And some of them had taught him in junior high school a couple of years before, and so it Dave just wasn't very adept at anything. He could barely read, and his writing wasn't as good as that. But here was an English class, and I'll have to say that I just gave him the D that let him pass my class. And sometimes teachers pass their students with a D because they don't want them back again next semester. And I don't know whether that was my motivation or not, or part of it. But anyway, Dave seemed destined for failure, academically, socially, otherwise. If life were an assembly line, Dave would be one of those things that was rejected, thrown away because of deficiencies, because those are the most obvious things. The following year, after that year in the 10th grade, I was teaching a course in drama at the same school, and I had planned to put on a one-act play for the English classes during that particular time. And early in the morning before school on the day that we were to begin this, I was unloading some props, some things from my car, and it was very early. I was taking them into the auditorium, and in Seattle, it was probably raining. I don't remember, but it usually does up there. Uh, and I saw Dave walking down the corridor in the high school. Nobody else around, and he was walking along. I said, Dave, what are you doing here? And he said, I come here often because it's quiet and nobody bothers me. And I said, well, I've got some work to do. I got to haul some things in for the car. Would you like to come and help me? Oh, yeah. So he went down to the parking lot of the car and gathered up some things and helped me carry them into the auditorium to get set up for the day, for the plays. And before long, the drama students began to arrive for the play. And we were going to do a series of performances during the 7-period day. And because there would be 7 performances, I double cast the play. Each character had 2 different actors playing that character, alternating through the day. And we were getting things ready, and this cast was getting ready. And one of the cast members came up to me and he says, Mr. Hughes, so-and-so, another person, he's not here yet. And he was the partner of this guy. They were double cast. They actually had 2 roles. They were alternating. And he said, what do we do? And I said, I don't know. It hadn't happened to me before. And so I did some very, very quick thinking and rewrote those 2 parts. And this fellow took both performances of one part, and the other one was a small part. And so I quickly did a rewrite of that. And it was the part of a delivery boy who'd come into the police station and carrying a bag of lunch and say, here's your lunch, Sarge. And he had some other lines too, but I cut out all the other lines, and the only line he had was, here's your lunch, Sarge. And I said, can you say that, Dave? And he said, yeah. I said, well, you're going to be in the play. Okay. And so I know he must have been scared to death. But anyway, here's your lunch, Sergeant. I said, I'll tell you when to go on. And you do that. You just hand that bag and say, here's your lunch, Sergeant. Okay. So we started out, and through the 7 periods of the day, everything went beautifully. The only thing is some unkind students heckled Dave every time he came on the stage. They were used to doing that to Dave, so it was nothing unusual. But after the play was over, and we had all the accolades and so on after each performance, Dave came up to me at the end of the day and said, I'd like to join your drama class. What was I to say? He had stepped in and helped me, and I said, well, okay. And that was just before the semester break. So sure enough, at the semester break, he enrolled in my drama class. Not a student I would have selected to be in my class. But I have to say that over the next few weeks, the students gradually began to accept him. He participated. And that spring, we took a 2 or 3 one-act plays to the Northwest Regional Drama Festival. And we performed those, I think it was 3 different one-act plays during that time of the festival. Very successful. Everything went well. The most shocking thing, Dave was awarded Best Supporting Actor of the festival. Everyone was surprised, not the least of which was his drama teacher. Well, anyway, Dave had tasted success, something that I'm rather sure that he had never experienced before. And Dave was a different person. This shy lad who kind of walked with a drooped head and stooped shoulders suddenly began to stand straight and beam, and everyone liked Dave. In fact, one day I saw Dave walking down the hall with one of the most popular girls in school on his arm in arm. Next year, I had to leave, and there was a reduction in the force because Boeing went kaput, and not completely, but anyway, we had a reduction in force, and I lost my job, and I moved to Oregon, and I went back for a little visit, and so I went out to the school one day to visit, and I was in the teacher's lounge, and lo and behold, Dave and another one of my students came into the lounge to say hello. I couldn't believe the physical change. He was taller, he was upright, the change in him was phenomenal. And I've thought about that a lot. He had received attention of the welcome kind that he probably had never received before. He had achieved success in school and in life, and to some extent, that he probably had never achieved before. And what a change a little attention made in his life. Well, when I first met Dave, he was one of what I would call a throwaway person. He was a part of the throwaway people. And what I mean by that was that he had been rejected and neglected by his society. Dave was a throwaway person. Yet what a difference acceptance and recognition made in his life. You know, we see many throwaway people in this world. We see examples of throwaway people in the Bible, and a few of them come to mind. There was Zacchaeus, and the children like to sing the song about the little wee man, Zacchaeus. But Zacchaeus was despised, and he was despised because of what he did. He was a tax collector, and people did not want him around. They just avoided him, I'm sure. Well, Zacchaeus invited Jesus to come to his home for dinner. And Jesus did. He went, had dinner, ate with this despised tax collector. Then there was the woman at the well, Jacob's well, and she was a member of a whole class of despised people, Samaritans, those outcasts, those mongrel people. Um, and yet Jesus talked to her. She came to the well alone, and Jesus asked for a drink, and she said, "You don't have anything to draw water from. Why are you going to do that?" And that conversation led into a theological discussion. Surprising. It was surprising on except that on the in the aspect that, first of all, she was a woman, and Jesus talked to her in the public. She was a Samaritan, which no Jew would talk to in private or public. And they had a religious conversation. Unbelievable. Yet Jesus accepted her and talked to her. He found out a little bit about her in the conversation, and he told her things that she hadn't told him. She was an adulterer. She had had 5 husbands and was living with a man that she was not married to. But Jesus talked to her. Then there was a woman who had a similar reputation and who was at a she probably wasn't, I doubt if she was an invited guest to this dinner where Jesus was, but she came and fell before Jesus and began to cry. And she cried so much that her tears falling on Jesus' feet wet them enough that she could wash them. And using her own hair, she wiped his feet clean. And Jesus looked at his host and he said, "You know, I came in here at your invitation to dinner." I'm ad-libbing a little bit. He said, "You didn't give me any water to wash my feet," which was the custom, of course. And says, "And yet this woman has wet my feet with her tears and washed my feet in effect." And Jesus criticized his host for his lack of hospitality, but he talked approvingly of this woman, and her story would be told wherever the gospel was preached. And we see another such person in the book of John, chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. It's rather a little complicated, rather straightforward. It's preached on a lot. Jesus had been up in the Mount of Olives, and at dawn he came down and he came into the temple courts where people were gathered there, and he sat down and began to teach them. And the teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman, and they said, "She is an adulterer. She's been caught in the very act of adultery. And the law of Moses says we must stone a person such as that." And Jesus, they said, "What do you say?" And the law of Moses says, "What do you say, teacher?" They were using that question as a trap, trying to trap Jesus to use something against him. Jesus' response was, he bent down and began to write in the dust of the ground. A lot of speculation on what he was writing there. Some have speculated he was probably writing names of words of sins. But they kept questioning him. Finally, he straightened up and said, "If any one of you is without sin, let him be the first one to cast a stone." And then he started writing again. Nothing else was said. They began to leave. The oldest first, and that's significant. And then they gradually drifted out until the last person was gone. Young people were gone. And Jesus said, "Who's condemning you?" And she, I'm sure, looked around and said, "No one, Lord." And then he said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin." Now, let me be quick to point out that in each of these cases, these were all sinners. Jesus did not condemn them immediately. He accepted them immediately. He befriended them, or at least he was sociable to them, and he took the opportunity to teach them to be better people. God forgave this woman, the adulterer, because he had the power to do that. He had the power to forgive our sins because he was the perfect Son of God. He had just as much power to do that on that occasion as he did when he forgave the thief on the cross. Some people like to use that as an example of whatever. But Jesus had the power to do whatever he wanted. But my point is, he accepted those unacceptable people. Other cases I could bring up too, but those specifically point out what Jesus' attitude was toward the common people, what Jesus' attitude was toward the rejected people, the despised people, the failures in life, the people who, through perhaps no fault of their own, was under horrible circumstances. A couple of weeks ago, we were discussing a similar topic in a Sunday night class at church, and the question was, what's your attitude toward panhandlers? In our little town, we have our share of those. They stand out on the corner with their signs that says, "We'll work for. I'm traveling, need gas, whatever, you know." And I said, what's the attitude toward these folks? And there was discussion, and I've been in these kinds of conversations before. And there's typical kinds of things. Well, they ought to get a job, and they should look out for themselves. Da da da. Well, you can't. Some of them looked like they were well able to work for a living and yet had chosen to live off of the sponging off of other people by choice. But you can't sort out from among all the group which those are and which are the people who are truly needy. How do you tell? Someone spoke up and said, "Well, we don't need to. The Lord can sort that out. We just need to be obedient. Let him take care of the results. And if they've been scamming us, shame on them, not us. Because if we meet their need, then that is a noble work, and that's what a Christian should do." And I was reminded of the scripture in Matthew when Jesus talked to his followers about how they should regard and treat others in this world. And if you have your Bible, you might want to open to Matthew 25. We'll read verses 34 through 40. And I'll read it and give you a chance to find the passage if you want to, and you can follow along. Jesus says, "When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them, one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, 'Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom which prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me.' Then the righteous will answer him, saying, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe thee? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?' And the king will answer and say to them, 'Assuredly, I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me.' Then he will say to those on the left hand, 'Depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me.' Then they will answer him, saying, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not minister to you?' Then he will answer them, saying, 'Assuredly, I say to you, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me.' Now, what does the Bible say about our attitude and our conduct toward God and our fellow man? Well, someone asked Jesus in Matthew 22nd, chapter 37, 39, what was the great commandment? Trying to justify himself, I'm sure. And Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, of equal value. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and prophets." All the law and the prophets hang on this one thing. A two-part answer. And then James, in his book, chapter 2, verse 27, says, "Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this, to visit the orphans and the widows in their trouble and keep oneself unspotted from the world." Now, James puts the emphasis on showing our faith, or our religion, if you will, on how we treat others. He says, if a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, "Depart in peace, be warmed and filled," but you did not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. James puts the emphasis on action, working out the faith, and that's usually what we concentrate on. But let's not forget what they did. They helped those in need. They accepted those when they recognized their need and met their needs. That's what they did. Sure, they were practicing and fulfilling their faith and living it out in the world, and that's what we usually concentrate on. We don't emphasize the fact that they did that. They met the need of the needy. That's why they're called needy, by the way, of course. So I'll just leave you with this question. What should be our attitude toward throwaway people? I heard for the first time this morning about your effort to house one night a month those throwaway people. And I'm proud of you for that. I had never heard of that before. And I'm glad you participate in that to show this community and the world that in spite of what they may think of those people, those throwaways, those rejects, someone cares for them and shares the love of Christ with them. Because what is the key word in the greatest commandment? Love. Love God, but love mankind. Love your neighbor as you do yourself. So the question is, what's our attitude? We know what the right attitude is. Now, I told you. But what is our attitude? How do we respond? Let's sing.